All right, thanks. Hi, everyone. So some of you know and some of you don't. Hello, thanks for joining us. So I chatted with Anna and Jamie briefly about the best way to kind of cover the ground for this, and we determined that maybe it would be best for me to just kind of set the scene. So we're going to eventually build up to the current election, but not all of you will be fully aware of some of the dynamics in Canadian politics. The main thing I think to keep in mind, so this is a comment just about Canadian politics generally, but leading up to political management, is Justin Trudeau is a bit of an anomaly when it comes to branding, when it comes to marketing a candidate, because really, unlike most world leaders, he is somebody who has grown up in the public eye. He was born while his famous father was prime minister. So, right from the outset, this is somebody who is aware of dealing with the media and is aware of media management. And so, as he kind of gets older, he gets more and more media attention. I remember when he gets married, it was front page news in the national newspaper. And when his father dies, he gives this eulogy, and all sorts of people are saying, what a fantastic eulogy. This guy's definitely prime ministerial material. And eventually he becomes Liberal leader. I think it was 2013 or 2012. And when he becomes leader, really, he had a very, very thin resume. Aside from being charismatic, and aside from really having a sense of maybe understanding what Canada is, the reality is that he other than his charisma, it was really his famous last name that kind of propelled him forward to become leader of the Liberal Party of Canada, which historically has been the most successful federal political party. He becomes leader. He ends up leading his party to a majority government in the 2015 Canadian election. And a lot of this was because he was playing off a foil of Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who was a conservative leader for more than a decade and prime minister for nearly a decade, but really built up using a lot of political marketing that was about strict message control, very sort of, it was so tight that it came across as anti-democratic often. And then in the 2015 election, Justin Trudeau kind of portrays himself as somebody who was extremely democratic, who was mingling with crowds, getting selfies all the time, and really projecting this sort of, almost marketing himself as somebody who can connect with ordinary people. Meanwhile, Stephen Harper is, running what a lot of people call a bubble campaign. He was insulated. He wouldn't allow many journalists to ask questions. It was sort of what happens when marketing almost goes amok. Throughout all of that, though, one thing that was interesting was conservatives were not keen on, a lot of conservative candidates and MPs were not keen on going negative against Trudeau. And this was unusual because it had worked quite well against previous Liberal leaders. And all of a sudden now you had this leader who seemed impervious to anything negative said about him. Canadians didn't like it because they felt they knew him. And the conservative candidates and MPs didn't like it because people were complaining to them. And so Trudeau has this lure and luster that most leaders don't have in Canada, and really, frankly, in most places around the world. So he ends up becoming leader. He has high expectations. What I would argue some people call a sort of rhetoric reality gaps. He says he's going to do all these things and everything's going to be wonderful. And he's got these high expectations, and then often he underperforms and underdelivers. And yet he still kind of manages to go along because people like him, and his heart's in the right place and this kind of thing. He ended up getting into some difficulties in 2017 and 2018, and particularly in 2019. And then all these internal difficulties led to the 2019 election campaign, where Trudeau was front and center, but the reality was a lot of people were actually kind of getting tired of him. And he ended up being knocked down to a minority government. That kind of simplifies things. Since the 2019 election, initially at first, I think that Trudeau realized that people were kind of tired of him. And he really went underground. For the first little bit in fall of 2019, he was really nowhere to be seen. And he put forward a major minister, Chrystia Freeland, and she was really the main spokesperson for the government. Trudeau reappears and he has a beard. And people are just saying, well, what does this mean? What does this mean that he's got a beard? And it's this idea that he's changing his image, changing the way he's marketed. Now he's going to be more serious. And then we have the pandemic hit. And all of a sudden, Trudeau is front and center on people's televisions every day, standing in front of the prime minister's residence, and saying, addressing the country and taking leadership. It became so common for people to tune in with very high ratings that it became known as the morning show for some people. And then not only did he have a beard, but his hair started getting longer and longer, and people started commenting on this. And again, Trudeau knows exactly what he's doing. And this was, kind of a metaphor for trying to connect with ordinary people, that he could feel their pain. Well, Trudeau did so well during this period, and the numbers, the support for the Liberal Party went quite high. They spent all sorts of money on all sorts of programs. And for the most part, the opposition realized that it was better to kind of get on side with the Liberals rather than, always oppose everything they were doing. And this was actually very common in Canadian provinces. So throughout the pandemic, there's been a number of provincial elections. And in all cases, except for one recent one, the government always got more seats and did better. So Trudeau was surely looking at this and calculating, well, gee, maybe we should go to an election before difficult decisions need to be made post-pandemic. So the 2019 election happens. Under the Constitution, there's not another election isn't required till 2024. And under fixed date election legislation, another election is actually not required till 2023. So here we are, at least 2, if not 3 years early, and Trudeau says, hey, we should have an election. And when he calls the election, he's not very good at articulating why. And initially, for people like me, it was like, well, whatever. Everyone complains about an early election. Nobody likes it. Everyone kind of grumbles. Maybe they'll move on to other things. And what's been interesting is that hasn't exactly happened. And so, as Anna and Jamie will probably end up remarking on shortly, the media management that Trudeau has engaged in up till this point, in many cases, has been very, very strong. Sometimes it has been weak. I just want to mention in 2017, I hinted there were problems in 2017, 18, 19. One that stands out to me is there was something known as his India trip. And so Trudeau goes and he's representing Canada abroad, and Canadians love this because he's getting all this international attention in 2016 in particular. And he's seen as this international rock star, and at least that's how what we were told here in Canada. But 2017, he goes to India, and he's wearing all these. Him and his wife and his young children keep changing clothes, and he ends up being kind of decried as more Indian than an Indian, in the sense that he's really hamming it up for the cameras. And people found this to be a bit of a national embarrassment. So that was, to me, a kind of a tipping point for where people started looking at Trudeau, started saying there's these rhetoric reality gaps between somebody who's he used to be a drama teacher, and he's somebody who's definitely a celebrity who hams it up for the cameras, and yet at the same time maybe isn't always as studious as some people would hope. So yeah, that leads us up to where things are now in the election. I don't want to spoil the thunder of what Anna or Jamie may have, and I'm trying to stay under time, so I'll pass it over.